The throwaways are, well, it wasn't me. People get a bit defensive, and not that that's understandable, but I think that's not what we're debating. That it's trying to put, I guess, a person or a face to the issue. It's more about discussing what Australia is from an inclusivity perspective, and therefore choosing a time that allows everyone to feel the same on this time and date, and trying to work through those barriers. And I have those conversations within my own, I guess, community with, whether it's family, friends, whether you get in a little bit of a debate with people, which I think is okay. I think that's sort of, most good things come from a disagreement at times, and you have to work through that in your own way. But I think a lot of it begins with a conversation. I think that's what Indigenous, people have been doing for so long, to fight for let's just have a conversation about it and get to a point where something's on the table. But it feels like, or seems like, that hasn't been the case.
Belinda Duarte. I am a director here at the Western Bulldogs, residing with Noble on the country of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung and the Boonwurrung people here in Naarm in Melbourne. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners, pay our respects to their elders past and present, and thank them for allowing us the gift of this beautiful land to play football on. Not only to play football, but to have a whole range of ceremonies. And today we'll be having a chat with two of our talented young men about January 26 and its significance to this country, and I guess to them as individuals, as a part of the footy club. We are leading into a significant date for the country that has had an interesting history in Australia, known to our mob in a range of different ways as January 26, as Survival Day, Invasion Day, and more broadly it can be known as Australia Day for that date in January 26. And, Arty, you've got your tea on, not a date to celebrate. You're both here to talk about what it means to you and the journey you've gone on to have these yarns. And for so many of our mob, First Nations mob, we just don't want to have this conversation anymore. We are wanting us to grow up as a country and be very inclusive of First Peoples of Australia. Where are you at with it, Arty?
It's every year gets a bit harder. You get older, you mature a lot more, and then you just realise, like me personally, I know Australia has a dark history, and it just means it's another lap around the world, educating still. And I guess it does get tiring trying to educate. It's very much needs to be educated. The story needs to be told. But for Indigenous people, it does get a bit tiring that we're still sitting here trying to plead out, trying to cry that this day is so significant to our people. And it's a little bit ridiculous that it's still on January 26th. Like, there's 365 days in a year. Obviously, we could choose one other day to celebrate it, change the date, and obviously it's clearly this year's petition is it's not a day to celebrate. So yeah, it's very tiring, infuriating, but like it's a great country. We live in a great part of the world. We should admire what we have, and I think for us to take the next step as being a whole, we really do need to change the state.
So talked about the petition. We've just been in a yarn up with the Clothing the Gaps mob and talking through that petition. They give a reminder about the context and how really in the country's history it was quite recently nominated as a date and described earlier, it was knocked around as like a hockey puck there at one point, deciding where it should fit. Bont, tell us, what comes to mind for you now, being more informed, I guess, on what January 26 means for you, and what perspectives have you got around that date?
Yeah, definitely a lot more perspective of recent, years and time, and it's since been, part of now a couple of marches. We've tried as a football club to basically, offer it up or schedule around the march as being an important opportunity for people and our people at the football club to get along to and show their support. And as I said, it's an individual journey, and everyone can take their time on those things, because that's just how the world works, But I think the most important thing for me, especially early in my journey, was just to listen and absorb and feel, through Arty's words, and I've heard Jamara speak and Lockie as well, is, how painful a time it is, and to really absorb that emotion, which in the end you hurt for, I guess, when you consider the conversation around the date isn't to not celebrate Australia, it's just to choose to do it on a different date, is that we all sit here, love the things that our country is able to sort of provide for us, but it's obviously the time which that date represents, and the pain and the heartache and the severity of what happened from that moment forth, that therefore continues to really hurt and affect Indigenous people and culture. And the short video that we watched just before through Clothing the Gap, as you mentioned, is another strong reminder of what it does represent, and how there are other dates that could just as easily acknowledge and celebrate our great nation, but just that on a different date. And I guess, I speak for myself in this scenario, and just hope that other people who may listen are open to exploring their own feelings and emotions, because especially when you hear from an elder or an Indigenous person around the raw emotion side of it, it should make you think and comprehend things in a different light. And I think that's all you hope, is that people open themselves up to thinking, not their instant response to change being to close off and therefore say, that the throwaways are, well, it wasn't me. People get a bit defensive, and not that that's understandable, but I think that's not what we're debating. That it's trying to put, I guess, a person or a face to the issue. It's more about discussing what Australia is from an inclusivity perspective, and therefore choosing a time that allows everyone to feel the same on this time and date, and trying to work through those barriers. And I have those conversations within my own, I guess, community with, whether it's family, friends, whether you get in a little bit of a debate with people, which I think is okay. I think that's sort of, most good things come from a disagreement at times, and you have to work through that in your own way, but I think a lot of it begins with a conversation. I think that's what Indigenous people have been doing for so long, to fight for let's just have a conversation about it and get to a point where something's on the table. But it feels like, or seems like, that hasn't been the case.
Yeah, and look, I guess our society is a reflection of past policies, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And we're playing catch up with being educated in this space, and for a lot of people, they don't even know that prior to it actually being selected as the date, well prior, First Nations mob, our mob recognised it as a day of mourning, and that was very, very well, I guess, profiled for many, many years, and you can imagine that would land quite destructively from a wellbeing perspective when those at that time decided to select and move that date to that day. Heavy conversations to be had at a footy club. Why do we need to have them at our football club and in the broader community? What do you think?
Well, I guess talking with Clothing the Gap before, they brought it up. I guess our kind of the power that we have on our platforms, I guess, the conversation that we have in our four walls, and I guess the support, and once we kind of educate in our four walls, then it kind of empowers everyone else to try and educate and use their platforms to, I guess, spark the conversations. So I think it's important for us to do that, to have the conversations in here, but then also to the draft every year. We pick up 4 to 6 new kids that might not have a clue, you know, and it's just another, I guess, another opportunity to gain an ally or to educate. So I think it's very important that we, I guess, educate our backyard before we want to try and march as a whole collective group. So I think just the power that this club can provide for Indigenous and non-Indigenous to like unify, it's very, very important that we spark the conversations as men and women to stand together, and then just to see what the future can hold.
Yeah, I mean, when you consider what all athletes do, there's a considerable amount of bravery it takes to get out on the field, and run through each other, like physically beat each other up to some extent. Per capita, there's a lot of brave people within football clubs, and I think you like to encourage off the field people to be brave, within their lives, and not everyone can relate to the football sense, but most people can relate, because it doesn't take anything really physical to you taking a stance on something. So you have a greater opportunity to connect with people on social justice issues like this one, where people can actually take, your lead on things, and it gives all athletes a great opportunity to explore, how can I be brave in a different setting, but also how can I potentially leave a legacy beyond the football field. We're not all going to get the same opportunities out there on the grass. You won't be able to see the grasses over Belinda's shoulder here, and it gives you a great opportunity to be an influence in a different way, and explore. We're used to having tough conversations at football clubs. We're quite they're quite mainstream, I guess, here, because we have to in order to improve ourselves, to hopefully find an edge on football. And this is getting into football talk, but it's very much the same when it comes to issues like this day, and it takes some bravery, and it takes you being willing to sit down and maybe confront some things that you might not feel necessarily relate to you, but you can have some sort of influence on. So there's many reasons. I just think we're blessed with an opportunity to maybe help someone else find their way on their own journey.
Yeah, terrific. It's interesting. I posted something around bravery just yesterday and talked about, in essence, that in order to take an action of bravery, you do need to feel fear, because that's what being brave is to face fear. What fears do you think the everyday Australian has around this?
Well, generally feeling like they're going against the norm is definitely one I reckon they would feel is, not wanting people to turn on them, whether they think they're their friends, their family, whatever the case may be. It's the things of feeling like you might be outcast, I guess, when you're on the other side of things, which may happen, but I guess you end up wondering then, all right, what do those people necessarily completely mean to me if that's the case, if they're not willing to support something similar or just support me in my own journey. They don't necessarily have to agree with me, but this is what I'm doing. You hope people will respect that that's your choice on something, and respect that you've made a choice to either do something different or do something you believe in. I think that's what we all hope from our friends and family is, regardless of what it might be, if you feel strongly about something, then support you in that.
Yeah. Has it always been that way, Bont? On this date, Yeah,
I just, maybe the thing is people, take things personally, I guess, in the sense of the marches and the conversation around changing the date. They feel like something's going to be taken away from them, or they feel like they're being blamed for something that obviously happened in a previous almost lifetime and a previous history, and therefore I feel like they wonder, I didn't do that. That's what I feel like you hear a lot of, is that it wasn't me, or they start to almost defend themselves over a conversation that might be difficult and confronting, versus truly understanding the meaning behind why the conversation's being had and why it's being so, I guess, forcefully sought out by Indigenous peoples. And I think that's what it probably, I can't say that I was ever defensive about it, but it probably took me to truly listen and understand as to why it was such an important conversation to have.
Yeah, terrific. It's interesting, isn't it? Because you think of days, where there's remembrance days, whether it's war, Battle of Long Tan, Holocaust, significant dates that are recognised globally around the country. And could you imagine actually taking over that day and say, we're going to have a party, we're going to celebrate, the common sense isn't there, is it? It's how did that happen, do you think?
There's obviously been a disconnect, obviously somewhere along from a historical standpoint where, the idea of Australia Day became more of a, the time spent together maybe than and a lot of people, and we all the things about Australia Day in terms of what happens is, Australian, I guess, in terms of coming together, barbecues, things like that, all those things which we love to do together. It's just on the wrong date. And I think people aren't able to connect maybe those two things, and therefore maybe that's why it becomes difficult for so many to maybe jump behind it, because they feel like, once again, something's being taken away, but there's a disconnect in the messaging and the education of what the day represents. So it probably needs to start further back, and not just be a conversation that happens always around the date, as opposed to something that comes in a lot sooner in the lives of many. And whether that's from a schooling perspective, from a youth perspective, so that the message is getting in long before the time rolls around.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's one of those things that the power of being informed and the history of the history of the country, the history of our country collectively. It is all of our history, and truth telling is an important part of it, and that means being clear about the facts. So any other comments you want to share or offer to, whether it's people that are thinking about what they might do on January 26th, to seed some reflections that you might have had between the two of you over as your journey has evolved, and how we relate leading into that date, what we do and might say on our socials. Clothing the Gap had some comments and ideas around what allies can do to really make sure that our young mob feel the love too. We don't talk about how important to feel recognised and loved is, when we want a community, a country that is really inclusive, on what some of the ramifications are on that date, when there's an invisibility to the experience for many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
I guess something for non-Indigenous people to do is, I guess, just be there to celebrate, not celebrate, but be there to support. If you do have an Indigenous friend, colleague, partner, person in your life, be there to, I guess, help them through the tough day of Jan 26, because for every person it's different. There's obviously the day of survival, so some people could celebrate it in that way, shape or form, or the day of mourning, or the day of invasion. So
and there really are some people that celebrate it as Australia Day. There are a small percentage of mob that choose to as well. So there is that recognition. Yeah,
so it is whatever emotion does pop up on that day, just, I guess, be there in support of however they're feeling. I know this Jan 26 I will be doing the march, and I think the club's very strong on participating in that. It's not for everyone, but if you do want to get down and support that just by being there, I'll suggest that. But
well, it's a good way for people to, feed their curiosity too, isn't it? And to get across some yarns that are had and some experiences, through people talking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, and we sit here, discussing, and that's what I guess I'm doing, is speaking from my journey and my perspective. So I guess I don't profess to tell anyone what to do. I more just encourage them based on what I've done. We just take the time to self-reflect, listen. I've been fortunate to listen to Arthur and Jamar and Liam and Riley on multiple occasions about their journeys and the pain that comes across with this time of the year. Sign up to pages, follow Clothing the Gap, sign the petition if you feel like you really want to put your name behind a movement, again, and it's going to continue to take work and hard work, and it might still take some time, but it doesn't mean you stop, and I think that's my thing. I've been to a number of marches, and definitely my first experience, the enormity and the size of it really hits you between the eyes, and even the volume of the speaking and the speeches that goes on there's some great power and depth behind the stories that are being told, and it really does open your eyes up. So I think that's what, if you're interested, you've got to be willing to do, is go there with an open mind, read things with an open mind, and make a decision for you, something that feels true to you and your values, and reflect inwards before reflecting outwards. So I think that's all I could hope for people who might catch some of this, conversation and podcast, is they're just way more open and considerate of the time of the year.
I love the way you put it around values. The importance of when you're more informed and you've got the mind that's curious, and then you anchor in your values, which are often behavioural, heartfelt, about who you stand for as a person. And it's quite fitting that, Clothing the Gap's about wearing your values. And, for those that are interested, a shout out to that petition. It's about a not a date to celebrate. It's not about, that this country isn't extraordinary. It is in so many ways, but it is about, considering and the significance to many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across the country. There's one other area that is down here to talk about, and it's about the divisiveness and what you see out there that can be really divisive. Any comments that you'd like to make around that?
I mean, as I've grown up, we very much get told to just ignore it, just kind of don't pay respect to it, because that's just, there's always going to be, I guess, ignorant people in the world. So Mum's always challenged us to just ignore it, just kind of blindside it. So I guess to that question, is just, I'm just going to try ignore it, know it's there, but just, I guess, try and not give it the power that some people may be searching for. And I guess that's where having unity in numbers in this day, celebrating the march, kind of nullifies their impact, or just what they think the norm is. So I think, just for me, I've just ignored it for most of my life. So
and continue to be a stand in your own values, and it's awesome. Bon?
I mean, I think you just, once again, we talked about bravery before. If it's something that, I'm quite, comfortable and happy to say that I don't feel like I have to experience too much of it within my own sort of community. And I'm quite proud of that, I'm really fortunate with my family and my friendship group, that, I don't feel like I have to, come across those sorts of actions and behaviours really ever. But when you consider the football world, which has definitely had its moments of divisiveness and where there's been instances of racial vilification, that I think, I'm proud of the way our club tries to really set the record straight on those things and stand behind each other. And I think that's sort of the message for me is continue to be brave and call out actions and behaviours that aren't consistent with your morals and your values, but also what we want to stand for as a country, and that is inclusion. That everyone has the same right to feel respected, and treated the same. And I think that's sort of the line that I try to continue to stand on and never move from. So that would probably be with what I think the question is asking. That's probably where my mind goes.
It's interesting too. I think I run a not-for-profit called Culture is Life, and for a number of years we've run a campaign around January 26. It's interesting on those platforms, our social media platforms, and I think it's important to remind people on what is out there on social media, and there are, often some of the horrendous commentary that we would get on our posts, and the racism was very disturbing. And as an organisation that's committed to social emotional wellbeing of young people, we had to heavily monitor some of the social media. I say that and remind people that often what is put out there into the space with a lot of, the divisive actions, they'll often find that they're anchored in one account that's actually intentionally set to be divisive and to agitate and to divide versus unite and inform. So for a lot of the young mob that are out there on social media, just to be reminded about that and what choices they're making and what to share, and to consider what is the consequences of what they share and how they share it to influence change. To be, to your point, Bon, this club, what I love about it is that we're a stand for goodness, we're a stand for being inclusive, and we don't shy away from tough conversations. And rightly or wrongly, today we're still having this conversation around this date. Arty, I want you to think of all those young nephews, nieces, all the nibblings out there, all those young people around the country. Same with you, Bont, as well, Marcus. Think about those young First Nations people out there, and not just them, your aunties and uncles and communities across the country. And what would you like to say to them as an offering leading into a time that's often pretty challenging for our people?
I'd say definitely to the young ones, stay true to yourself, stay true to your culture, because we have the oldest living culture in the world. So definitely that's never going to change. It's never going to go anywhere. So stay strong and true to yourself. And to the elders out there, aunties, uncles, pops, nans, look after yourselves on another day of mourning, survival. Really appreciate the time that we have with each other. It is another challenge, it's another hurdle to get over, but it's beautiful what's on the other side. So this is another day to unite and stay strong with each other and really show that we're still here and we're still surviving, we're still living, and our beautiful culture gets to live on.
That's beautiful, Arty.
Oh no, mate. I wouldn't, profess to say anything from the perspective of I can, I guess, relate to the pain and the heartache that it represents. But all I would say is continue to keep fighting. You know that you've got, an ally in myself and many others here at the Western Bulldogs, and I know, across the AFL that I hope other teams are approaching the day and week in the same vein of opening up a conversation again to continue to explore the conversation around how we can all support, First Nations people, and that you've got so many who do, and will continue to in this fight, which there's no knowing when, but there is hope and belief that it will happen, and we will continue to support, or I should say, I will continue to support with everyone else in the building here for a better future and a better time for all, especially Indigenous peoples.
And look, we were just chatting about it with Clothing the Gap, and a lot of the huge cohort of the reconciliation community, they'll either make a decision to work on that day as a stance of support, or they'll wear their values on themselves for that day. So, to our Doggies fans, get out your Indigenous round Guernseys, wear them. If you don't have another tee, or if you want to get a hold of one, there's Clothing the Gap, a number of other organisations like Minority Co, and others that provide tees and attire to show your support in a positive way. It's not neglecting your pride in country in any way. It is acknowledging a date not to celebrate, and a shout out from my perspective of a reminder of how much our people love, and to remind yourselves that within our families we deeply love our children, our aunties and uncles, and those that have gone before us, and we want to recognise that their fight has been to ensure our voice and our experience has been heard and understood. It is not about shame, it is about truth, and it is about healing. And to your point, Arty, coming together in a united way as a country, something so special to celebrate the oldest living culture in the world in an appropriate way, that isn't at a time that was recognised by a number of people as the day of mourning. But that's the yarn for January 26. Thank you. I've really loved this yarn with you today, and just want to again acknowledge the generosity that you bring to conversations that require deep thinking. It requires tapping into that frustration that, Arty, time and time again as you go on, and you've seen, no doubt, your mother and, family have to have these conversations again and again, and we get tired. So, you're a credit to your family and to many of our mob to keep, as a young person, giving voice to what matters, and the experiences that for you and a number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across the country that, identify with what you're saying. So you don't need to be doing this, but you've made that choice. And to one of our strongest allies here in the footy club, Marcus, I appreciate your leadership on so many different levels. The power of your authenticity to remind people to engage with themselves and take a reflective approach to why we are where we are on this date, thinking about, why we need to consider that it's not a date to celebrate. But thank you, beautiful men.
Thank you.
Loved having the yarn.